Hey guys, welcome back to my channel. If you like the video, make sure to subscribe to my channel. Let's begin.
This valley, on the border of the lands of fire and sound, was once the site of a legendary battle between Madara Uchiha and Hashirama Senju more than a century ago. The valley became a scar on the earth itself, the two shinobi that fought here forever etched into the valley by the two statues that lined the waterfall that ran through this place. It is here, in the shadow of these famed warriors, that two other shinobi were fighting in a desperate battle of their own.
These two shinobi were Naruto Uzumaki and Sasuke Uchiha. The manipulations going on around them had poisoned Sasuke's mind as he tried to kill his best friend in order to gain the fabled Mangekyo Sharingan. Naruto, meanwhile, was desperately trying to stop Sasuke from leaving Konoha to join the vile shinobi Orochimaru, who wanted to take Sasuke's body for his own.
Despite his efforts, however, Naruto was unable to convince his best friend to see error of his ways and had to use more force as their battle reached its ultimate climax. Sasuke prepared to use his curse mark enhanced Chidori while Naruto prepared his Kyuubi enhanced Rasengan. With their jutsus fully charged, Naruto and Sasuke at each other, their jutsus colliding before exploding, which caused severe damage to the statues of the famed founders of Konoha.
Sasuke was knocked back by the explosion, smacking into the statue of Madara before falling to the ground, still alive but unconscious and critically injured. Fate was, tragically, not so kind to Naruto, who was pierced through his heart by Sasuke's Chidori and was launched into the lake below, his body further paralyzed by the electricity generated by the lighting-style jutsu. As Naruto fell further down into the depths of the lake, he could barely hear the Kyuubi's voice as he appeared before the beast's cage. "Wake up, you fool. We're dying," the tailed beast yelled. The Kyuubi's attempt to rally his Jinchuriki was a useless gesture, however, as Naruto's were too grave for even him to heal. "You know as well as I do that we're already dead, Kyuubi," Naruto replied. Before the Kyuubi could say anything, however, Naruto said something that shocked the tailed beast. "I was hoping to do something about your hatred someday as well. I guess that's now going to be impossible, however. I'm sorry, Kyuubi, for letting you down," the dying ninja said. The Kyuubi was, naturally, stunned by this. The Kyuubi wouldn't have believed what his Jinchuriki just said except for the fact that the look in Naruto's eyes had as serious a look as they've ever been. Normally I would have accused someone who said that of lying to me. For some reason, however, I can tell that you're being honest with me. Sighs. Maybe if we had lived that might have succeeded, the Kyuubi said as the darkness began to consume him and Naruto. "I wanted to ask you something, Kyuubi, and since we're dying I might as well ask it now. Do you have a real name?" Naruto asked. This shocked the Kyuubi. No one since the time of the Sage of the Six Paths had ever thought to ask for his name. "Since you're not as bad as I thought, I guess I can tell you. My name is Kurama," he said as the last vestiges of life within him and Naruto vanished, but not before Naruto commented on the tailed beast's name. "So your name is Kurama, huh? I think it suits you." Sighs. "Farewell, Kurama," Naruto said as he awaited the afterlife, unaware that he and Kurama would not be so easily separated. Konoha Hospital. Meanwhile, Kakashi had just brought Sasuke back from the Valley of End. Having found his unconscious body, he had not found any sign of Naruto and had assumed that he would be healed by the Kyuubi and would return to Konoha within a couple of hours. As a team of medics, led by the Tsunade, were treating Sasuke for his wounds, which bordered on the mortal level, Kakashi was trying to calm down Sakura, who had arrived at the hospital upon receiving and who surprised her sensei with her reaction. She was angry, but not at Naruto. "How could you leave Naruto alone like that, Kakashi-sensei? You saw what he had to do just to stop Sasuke from leaving. He's probably badly hurt now as well," Sakura yelled. "Sasuke was the only one I found, Sakura. I wouldn't worry him, though. His wounds have always healed quickly, so he probably won't be gone for no more than a couple of hours," Kakashi reassured his squad member. What he didn't was that it actually going to take a few years before Naruto returned and, even then, it would not last. Shortly after dying, Naruto arrived in the Soul Society where he was greeted by his Minato and Kushina, his parents, who had sensed their son's presence when they felt the power of Kurama. Naruto was surprised, though strangely relieved, to find out that Kurama was still inside him. The tailed beast was still bound to Naruto's soul. It didn't take Naruto long to make good on his promise to Kurama, earning his trust and shortly thereafter, as an unintended benefit, full access to his powers. After reuniting with the third Hokage and meeting several other shinobi, all of whom had become Shinigami, a.n. The full list of shinobi in the Gote 13, with their respective ranks, can be seen at the end of this chapter. Naruto decided to become a Shinigami himself and entered the Shino Academy. Naruto was surprised to find out that he was considered a prodigy there, and apparently the best one the Gote 13 have had to date. He was also surprised by, though was happy with, the fact that no one cared about his status as a Jinchuriki and, as such, did not suffer from the prejudices that he had to deal with back in Konoha. This allowed to befriend people more easily and allowed him to reach his full potential as a Shinigami. Naruto's skills and power allowed him to graduate from the academy in 1 year. Naruto joined the 13th Division after he graduated and his captain, Jashiro Yukitake, decided to make the blonde his lieutenant, making Naruto the first lieutenant of that division since the death of Kaion Shiba. This was where Naruto found himself, 18 months later, when they arrived.
Chapter 1 Ryoka. Current time. The small prison cell in the barracks was seldom without an occupant thanks to Byakuya Kuchiki's strict adherence to the law.
The person imprisoned in the cell right now was a special case, however, for it was none other than Byakuya's younger sister-in-law, Rukia. The adopted member of the Kuchiki family was currently speaking to her longtime friend Renji Aburai, who was getting annoyed with her comments about his new promotion to lieutenant of the 6th Division. "Do a good job, Lieutenant. You're very strong, Lieutenant. You have weird eyebrows, Lieutenant," Rukia said as an irritated Renji grabbed the bars of the cell. "That's it, damn it. Let me at her. I'm gonna," Renji said until both he and Rukia sensed a very large, and very familiar, surge of Ryotsu emanated nearby and approached them. Renji's face paled as he knew what was that meant. Maybe you should run, Renji," Rukia said, knowing full well who was the source of the Ryotsu. Renji, heeding his friend's advice, began to run towards the only door in and out of the prison room. Unfortunately for Renji, it was too late for him to run as that door suddenly flew off its hinges and smacked the bars of the cell before it shattered into millions of pieces. Renji flinched heavily when he heard the culprit's voice. "Tattoo brows." The voice roared as the person charged into the cell, and right at Renji. "Please calm down, Naruto. I swear I can explain," Renji pleaded before he was silenced by a kick to the face, courtesy of the 13th Division lieutenant. "You went to arrest Rukia and attacked her. You think you can just explain that way?" Naruto yelled as he grabbed Renji by his shiakusho and shook him until he was almost unconscious. Normally both he and Renji were good friends and were basically brothers. After he was informed of Renji's actions during Rukia's arrest, however, Naruto's temper, which, among many of Naruto's other attributes, has become legendary in the past year and a half, was unleashed. His temper did not flare up often, but when it did there was little anyone could do to stop him if no one from the shinobi world, or at least a close friend, was nearby. Thankfully, for Renji, Rukia was there. "Please stop it, Naruto. It's not worth hurting Renji," Rukia pleaded, getting the attention of her commanding officer. "Who let go of the badly bruised Renji?" Naruto ran up to her cell. "Rukia, are you hurt?" Naruto asked her with obvious concern. "I'm alright, Naruto. Just a little down, that's all," Rukia said as she thought about her lieutenant's very strong protective nature. He was always like this with the members of his squad. Like a shepherd to his flock, he was very concerned over the safety and well-being of the members of the 13th Division, and Rukia, knowing her lieutenant far too well, knew that even if he was, for whatever reason, transferred to another division, that sentiment would still be there. Naruto nodded, but before he said anything, however, Renji managed to get up. "Naruto, I know you're upset, and I'm really sorry for what I did, but can you at least let me speak to Rukia in peace?" Renji asked, to which Naruto sighed. "Fine. But the next time something like this happens again, tattoo brows, I swear to Kami you'll be face down on the ground eating bricks faster than you can say, tailed beast," Naruto warned, still simmering from his latest outburst. "In any case, I have to report to old man Yukitake right now, so I'll come back to check on you later, Rukia," Naruto said, to which both Rukia and Renji nodded. As Naruto left the 6th Division barracks, he couldn't help but think of his father's warning earlier in the day, when he had been running a few errands for his captain. I didn't want to tell you this just yet, but now it seems that the time to wait has finally passed. Keep a close eye on my captain whenever you're in his presence, as I fear this is his doing, Minato warned him, though there wasn't a real need to do so. Unlike the rest of the Gotei 13, the shinobi turned shinigami, who were known as Shinobigami by many of their colleagues, had suspected Aizen of plotting something along with Ichimaru and Tosen. They had even figured out the true nature of Aizen's Zanpakuto, a fact that earned him even less trust amongst the Shinobigami. Even the thick-headed Naruto could tell something was wrong with those 3 captains. Naruto's suspicions were also shared by both Kurama and his Zanpakuto, which showed just how poor a mask Aizen wore. Because of the fact that the 3 captains had everyone else in the Gotei 13 fooled, however, the shinobi kept their suspicions to themselves until they could prove any wrongdoing on the part of those 3. As Naruto raced towards his barracks, he clenched his fist at the thought of the 5th Division captain. For your sake, Aizen, this better not have anything to do with you, Naruto thought to himself. He was unaware of the fact that, even now, the one person Aizen had the most interest in was preparing a daring operation into the heart of the Soul Society itself. 13th Division Barracks, Seireiti, more than a week later. Naruto had woken up before daybreak, as he had since the day he had visited Rukia. There was too much on his mind for him to sleep. It had already been a trying week since Rukia's arrest, as Naruto sat on the roof of this barracks to watch the sunrise. First the execution sentenced out to his friend occurred, then his subsequent argument with Byakuya nearly coming to blows, though they had both never really seen eye to eye on anything before. Byakuya had found Naruto's lack of formality and even greater lack of respect for authority figures displeasurable, while Naruto actively despised Byakuya for his poor treatment of his subordinates and, especially, for placing the law even above his own family. This gulf had only gotten worse since Rukia's arrest, with Naruto's parents, Captain Yukatake, and Shisui Uchiha being the only ones that could stop the 2 Shinigami from trying to kill each other. The final thing that occupied Naruto's mind was the arrival of 5 intruders to the Rukongai sector of the Soul Society, one of them being the one whom Rukia had lost her powers to, and their attempt to enter the Seireiti. He especially had mixed feelings over what to think of that guy, who Rukia kept calling Ichigo. On the one hand, this Ichigo was responsible for Rukia's predicament. On the other hand, however, he was in the Soul Society now and was, more than likely, trying to save Rukia, so Naruto assumed that he actually did care for his friends. As Naruto pondered his next course of action, he felt a familiar Ryotsu approach him. "Good morning, Shisui-sensei. How are you feeling?" Naruto asked the Uchiha who had acted as his teacher since his graduation, teaching him skills that the Shino Academy instructors could not. "I'm alright, Naruto. I was actually going to ask you the same thing. Both of your parents and Captain Yukatake are worried about you since you haven't been getting much sleep recently," Shisui said. Naruto sighed at this comment. "I've just had a lot on my mind recently, that's all," Naruto said. Shisui, thanks to his time as Naruto's master, knew which particular thought was on Naruto's mind at the moment. "You should wait until the intruders enter the Seireiti first if you plan to confront them," Shisui said. The Uchiha knew that Naruto was planning to confront these intruders, regardless of what anyone tried to do to convince him to do otherwise, as the blonde probably believed that, by confronting them, he might find an answer to a question that must have been bothering him. "I know, sensei, but I've never been the most patient guy, and every day I wait is a day closer to Rukia's," Naruto said before he and Shisui noticed that a small light appear in the skies above the Seireiti as the sun began to rise. This light appeared to come closer and closer to the home of the Shinigami until, to the shock of both Shinobigami, the light collided with the soul shield membrane that surrounded the Seireiti. The small light was held back by the membrane for a few moments until, to the further shock of Naruto and the rest of the Shinigami, the light broke through the barrier and, after a minute or so, split into 4 streaks which began to descend to the city below. Everyone in the Seireiti already knew what this meant even before the barrier was breached. Before Shisui realized it, Naruto was already heading towards the nearest light, which he assumed to be one of the intruders. "It looks like they've finally arrived. It's time to see what kind of person you truly are," Ichigo Kurosaki, Naruto thought as he entered the nearest sewer entrance, having learned the layout of the underground network a few months prior, in order to approach the intruders without being detected. Underground sewer system, Seirei. Several hours later. The massive underground network was barely used as its layout was known to a handful of Shinigami, most of them from the 4th Division. One of these people, a young man named Hanataro Yamada, was currently navigating the system. What made this foray stand out, however, were the two intruders, who are called Ryoka by most of the other Shinigami, who were following him. One of these intruders, a guy with short orange hair and wearing a Soul Reaper Shiakusho, walked to Hanataro's side. "Hey, Hanataro, can I ask you something?" he asked. Hanataro got a little anxious before he nodded in reply. "When you talked about how there aren't many other Shinigami that knew their way around these sewers, you looked like you were going to add something to what you were saying before I interrupted you. Could you tell me what you were going to say?" he asked. "Well, there have been stories over the past few months, Ichigo. Apparently some of the other members of the 4th Division claim that they have seen another Shinigami walking through the sewers. They claim that the person is not of the 4th Division though. As of right now, none of them have been able to get a good look at the person to positively identify," Hanataro explained as both Ichigo and the other intruder, a man from the Rukongai region named Ganji Shiba, secretly hoped that this person was either a tall tale or, if they were real, that they would not be in the sewer right now. This would, apparently, not be the case. "Why don't we change that, then, since I'm here now?" a voice from the darkness said, causing Ichigo and the others to stop in their tracks. Ichigo gripped Zangetsu as he responded to the voice, prepared to fight whoever this opponent might be. "Who the hell are you?" Ichigo asked as Zangetsu was unsheathed. Ichigo looked at the path in front of him since the voice appeared to come from that direction. Hanataro, having recognized the voice, suddenly paled as he had a good idea of why that person was there. "It can't be. You're the one who's been using the sewer passages?" Hanataro asked in horror, to which the person responded to the affirmative. Ichigo, his patience grown thin, had had enough of this person's mind games. "Show yourself, damn it," Ichigo commanded, to which the person sighed. "You don't have to tell me that. I was going to do that anyways," the person said. The person soon stood before the three would-be rescuers, their appearance made visible to them by the fluorescent light bulbs that provided dim lighting to the underground network. It was a guy about Ichigo's age, though a little shorter than he was, with short and spiky blonde hair and blue eyes. He wore a standard shiakusho with an orange sash wrapped around his waist, an armband that had a badge of some sort around his left sleeve, and a black headband, with a metal plate emblazoned with the kanji for shinobi, sewn onto it, wrapped around his forehead. He had his zanpakuto, which was a katana with an orange hilt and a red spiral-patterned tsuba, sheathed and secured to his sash. The first thing that caught Ichigo's mind as being unusual, however, were the 6 marks on Guy's face, 3 on each cheek, that resembled whiskers. They made him look like some sort of fox. The second, and more important, thing that made this guy stand out from the other Shinigami Ichigo had encountered until then was the massive amount of ryotsu that emanated from him, as it was greater than anything Ichigo had ever felt in his short time as a Shinigami. Ichigo prepared for what he thought would be the most difficult battle he had fought until then as the mystery guy turned his gaze towards him. "Who are you?" Ichigo asked. The guy pointed his right thumb as his headband as he answered. "I'm Naruto Uzumaki, lieutenant of the 13th Division," he declared, shocking both Ganju and Ichigo. "How the hell can a lieutenant have so much ryotsu? I had a feeling that the lieutenants were no pushover, but this is ridiculous," Ganju said. It was a sentiment that was also shared by Ichigo, as the orange-haired Shinigami had fought a lieutenant, in this case Renji Aburai, before, and even he, with his crappy senses, could tell that guy before him now was on another level, another planet even, by comparison. If this guy's power was far greater than another lieutenant, then why was he at the same rank? "Because all the spots for captain are already taken, plus I haven't achieved one of the major requirements yet. That's enough about me, though," Naruto said as he focused his stare at Ichigo again. "Are you Ichigo Kurosaki? The one that Rukia talked about?" he asked, surprising Ichigo, who took a while before he made a response. "I guess I am. What's it to you?" Ichigo asked, to which Naruto sighed. Why are you here? Is it perhaps to save her? Naruto asked, giving the impression that he ignored Ichigo's question. Yes, I am, and I just asked you why does it matter to you? Ichigo asked with the irritation he felt clearly evident in his voice. It matters to me because Rukia and I are in the same division, you baka, Naruto replied, stunning Ichigo with his statement. Before Ichigo could say anything, however, Naruto continued to speak. Based on what Rukia told me, I have a feeling that you and I are alike in many ways. Size, unlike you, however, I still don't know what to do about her execution. That's why I'm going to put you to the test. To see if you're truly strong enough to save her. I think that if I do that then I can answer that question, Naruto said. Ganju, at this point, went up to Ichigo, who was standing a few yards away from Naruto. He could be setting a trap for us, Ichigo. How can we be sure he ain't lying? The Shiba clansman said before Ichigo cut him off. I can already tell you that he isn't lying to us, Ganju. If he had wanted to defeat us, he could have done it the moment he spotted us. Even I could tell that the difference in our powers is just too great. If he wanted to simply end our rescue, he could have knocked us out before we knew what happened. He's pretty good at concealing his Ryotsu. Instead he confronted us head-on, so I'm willing to take a leap of faith here, Ichigo said before he turned his attention to Naruto. What's this little test you have in mind? He asked the lieutenant, who flashed a smirk. It's nothing too complicated. All you have to do is fight me. You don't have to beat, though. All you have to do is wound me once. It doesn't even have to be a serious wound, though we'll both be using what powers we need in order to win. If you can do that, then you've passed. Any questions? Naruto explained as he unsheathed his Zanpakuto. What are we waiting for? Let's do this, Naruto Uzumaki. Ichigo said as both he and Naruto charged at each other. It wasn't long before their blades to collide with each other, signifying that the two Shinigami had begun their battle. Chapter 2, Finding an Answer. Naruto vs. Ichigo. Current time. As Naruto and Ichigo clashed in the sewers below the Seirei, both Ganju and Hanataro watched with the shock they were feeling clearly etched into their faces. Ganju was shocked at seeing this display of power on Naruto's part. Even though it was clear that the blonde-haired Shinigami was using less than a quarter of his strength, he was clearly getting the better of his opponent, who looked like he had been run over by a freight train while Naruto had yet to receive even a single wound. Hanataro, on the other hand, was amazed by the fact that Naruto had not taken Ichigo down after 20 minutes had passed. Hanataro had witnessed what the former shinobi was capable of with using that level of strength when Naruto protected him from a couple of 11th Division members who had been bullying him around. The amount of strength Naruto was fighting at right now was at the level of a captain, so the fact that Ichigo was still able to fight him was nothing short of a miracle. Naruto was also impressed by Ichigo's strength, even as he had forced the orange-haired Shinigami on the defensive, with the exception of his fellow Shinobigami and the captains that he fought when they tried to gauge his strength. Everyone else would have lost a fight against him in the first few minutes. Ichigo has not only managed to keep fighting him, the would-be rescuer had even managed to tire Naruto out considerably, as he had been forced to use both his Shunpo and Kido against Ichigo. Ichigo suddenly swung Zangetsu as Naruto's chest before the blonde could continue his attack. As Naruto shunpoed yet again, he took a moment to note Ichigo's massive amount of Ryotsu before he pointed his right index finger at Ichigo. Hado number 4. Byakurai, Pale Lightning. Naruto said he generated a concentrated lightning bolt that he then discharged at Ichigo. The orange-haired managed to dodge the attack as Naruto suddenly appeared above him. You're not bad, Ichigo, but you're going to have to try harder than that, Naruto said rather bluntly as he swung his Zanpakuto at Ichigo's head. I'm not finished just yet, Naruto Uzumaki, so don't act as if I am already beaten. You may be much stronger than I am, but I won't give up. I have to rescue Rukia, and if that means passing this little test of yours, then I will do it, Ichigo said in response to Naruto's comment. Naruto already knew that Ichigo was not finished but was trying to push the human to see just how much strength he had. After blocking Naruto's/Ichigo, to the former shinobi's surprise, stopped moving and had placed his Zanpakuto on his shoulders. Naruto wasn't the only one that was confused by Ichigo's actions, as both Hanataro and Ganju were also taken aback by this. What the hell is Ichigo doing? Ganju thought to himself as Ichigo just stood in that position, unmoving. Are you okay, Ichigo? Hanataro said as a sudden and massive burst of Ryotsu emanated throughout the area. Since the underground sewers were so deep below the surface that only those in the passages would have felt this upsurge in power. Naruto looked on as Ichigo suddenly turned his glare towards him. The former shinobi's eyes widened as Ichigo's eyes suddenly glowed a light blue. I'm sorry to keep you waiting, but now it's time to show you my resolve, Naruto Uzumaki, Ichigo said as Naruto looked at him in shock before he flashed a smirk.
Resolve, huh, so it is your will that has helped you through all this, Naruto thought to himself as he prepared to dodge the oncoming attack.
The Shinobigami was surprised when Ichigo lifted his massive blade. With the blade pointed towards the ceiling, it looked as if he intended to slash at Naruto despite the fact that he was 20 feet from the blonde. Ichigo then swung his Zanpakuto which, to Naruto's surprise, unleashed some sort of massive beam of Ryotsu as it was swung. Before anyone realized it, the beam reached Naruto, who suddenly vanished behind the light generated by Ichigo's attack. After a few moments the attack finally dissipated, leaving behind a column of smoke in a canyon-like chasm on the floor of the hallway. Ichigo looked on as his breathing became slow and heavy. Did I get him that time? Ichigo asked himself as he fell to his knees, his exhaustion and wounds having finally caught up to him. Though Ichigo assumed that Naruto did survive the attack, he wasn't sure if Naruto was able to fully escape the onslaught. As the column of smoke continued to dissipate at a slow pace, Ichigo and his two companions suddenly heard Naruto say something that shocked all three of them. You something else, Ichigo, you know that? You actually managed to wound me, Naruto said as the smoke finally cleared enough for the three would-be rescuers to see what had happened. Ichigo and Ganju couldn't believe what they were seeing. Naruto stood before them as if he was still unscathed. It was hard to tell, however, as the Shinobigami's entire body was now enveloped by what appeared to be a Ryotsu shroud that was in the form of flickering yellow flames. Naruto now wore what appeared to be a necklace made of Magatama beads, while an image of a larger Magatama appeared on the shroud where it enveloped Naruto's abdomen. The round circle of larger bead-like image was itself strange as it looked like a spiral pattern of some sort. In addition to the shroud, Naruto's hair was now spiked up with the two endmost locks now resembling horns. As final change in his appearance, Naruto's eyes had changed color, turning from blue to orange. The change in appearance was accompanied by an increase in Ryotsu that only Ichigo could withstand without being pinned down to the floor, though he had already fallen to his knees prior to this form. Naruto just used his 9 tails, Kyuubi, chakra mode, KCM. Ichigo was shocked, but, surprisingly, it wasn't from either the changes in Naruto's appearance or power. Why are you still unscathed? I thought you said that I wounded you, Ichigo said, to which Naruto sighed. You did wound me, Baka. If I hadn't unleashed this form when I did, that wound would have actually been fatal, Naruto explained away. Naruto then, to everyone's shock, dispersed the form that he had taken, which undid both the increase in his powers and the change in appearance. When the KCM dispersed, Ichigo, Ganju, and especially Hanataro, were surprised to see that Naruto had indeed been wounded. The blonde-haired Shinigami had what was clearly a slash wound that reached his left shoulder to what appeared to be inches above where his heart and major blood vessels. Ichigo realized what that wound meant if his smirk was anything to go by. I guess I passed your little test, Naruto, Ichigo said as his two companions got back to their feet. So you did, Ichigo, Naruto said as he motioned for Hanataro to heal the orange-haired Shinigami. As Hanataro began to heal a reluctant Kurosaki, he turned his gaze to Naruto's wound. Naruto noticed Yamada's concerned expression and waved it off. You don't have to worry about me, Hanataro. You should already know that this wound will probably be healed in a few minutes anyways, so focus your attention to Ichigo, Naruto reasoned. The former shinobi then turned his attention to both Ganju and the somehow conscious Ichigo when he saw that both had expressions on their faces that screamed confusion. I guess this would be the best time for an explanation about who I am and what I'm going to do now. Am I right? Naruto asked. He sighed when the two men nodded as he realized that this would take a while. 2 hours later, Naruto had finished his explanation to Ichigo and Ganju a few minutes prior and was now headed towards the sewer entrance that was located right next to the barracks of his division. After getting the group to agree to not talk about anything that he said to them after he parted from them, Naruto told them about himself, including a little bit about his past life since all of the Shinobigami did remember their past, and about the existence of the Shinobigami. The former shinobi then agreed to let Ichigo and his friends continue their efforts to rescue Rukia. Naruto, thanks to his battle with Kurosaki, even agreed to help the intruders with the rescue. Due to the suspicious nature of Rukia's execution, however, Naruto told the group that he would not join the group as it would be better if he got the other Shinobigami to help them as well. Though Ichigo was suspicious of Naruto's claim, he finally relented after a few minutes. After taking a few more minutes to explain he planned to do to the group, Naruto left, having agreed to meet with Ichigo and his friends, including those that were not present, once Rukia had been rescued. Naruto, despite being aware of the possible manipulations surrounding Rukia's sentence, decided not to tell Ichigo of these dark designs just yet as he had no solid proof of them. Naruto decided to ask his dad to hold a meeting with the other Shinobigami to inform them of the situation and to plan their course of action. Naruto didn't have to worry about the possibility of any of them refusing to help since they had been planning to deal with this situation anyways, though the group of former shinobi had yet to decide if they would have to forcibly stop the execution. As Naruto finally reached the ladder leading to the sewer entrance, he reflected on what had happened in these hallways today. He was especially reflected on his opponent, a thought that was not lost on the part of his inner entities. It's just like Rukia said, Naruto, he is a lot like you, a familiar voice said to him from within his mind. I guess he is, Kurama, though I'm shocked that his powers are still growing even now. To think that he's already at the level that he is makes me wonder if he even knows how much potential, Naruto replied. Says the kid who is already at the level where he can obtain Bankai yet refuses to do so, another voice said in a mocking tone. This caused a giant vein to suddenly poke out of Naruto's forehead. Are you seriously going to bring that up? I thought that we agreed to honor my dad's request to wait for that until a Shinobigami have dealt with that Bankai Aizen and his two lackeys, Naruto said in an irritated tone before he heard that same voice sigh at what he said. We did agree to that, Naruto. But let's imagine for a moment that Aizen is the one responsible for this entire ordeal and that he finally make his move against the Soul Society. Even though you're able to see past his illusions, your Shikai isn't going to be enough to deal with him. If you really want to save Rukia, you're going to have to make that decision. And it has to be made now, Naruto, the voice said. Just as Naruto was about to sigh at this lecture, Kurama stepped in. This guy may get on my nerves every time we have a conversation, Naruto, but he does have a point, the tailed beast said in agreement. You've always known how to push my buttons, don't you?
Kamikaze translation. Divine Wind. I guess I shouldn't be surprised since you are my Zanpakuto. Sighs, you do realize that I already know all of this, right? Because I know all of that already, I was going to tell you as well as Kurama that I plan to finally begin my Bankai training after I have this meeting with the others, Naruto said. Both of his internal resident were surprised by this but were unable to say anything before Naruto continued to speak.
I promised my dad that I would wait a bit before I began that training. If Aizen is the one who's responsible for Rukia's sentence, however, I can't afford to wait any longer. I'm going to need that power to deal with that man, so I'm going to ask Shisui-sensei to help me with my training, which I plan to begin tonight. As for my dad, as long as it actually helps us in stopping Aizen, what he doesn't know won't hurt him, right? Naruto explained. The former shinobi could tell that Kamikaze was smirking after hearing all of this as he began to climb the ladder out of the sewers. Chapter 3 Preparations. 4 hours later. Naruto was losing his patience as he waited, alongside the other lieutenants, for the officer of the 4th Division that was supposed to deliver the latest update on the situation with Ichigo and the other intruders 2 hours ago. After getting out of the underground sewers, Naruto first headed to his room in the 13th Division to change into another Shiakusho so as to not arouse suspicions with the tier that his earlier uniform now sported. After changing and placing his Zanpakuto in his room, he went to find his father. He managed to find his dad at the 5th Division barracks and managed to get him to hold a meeting with the other Shinobigami. Before either Naruto or Minato could even look for the others, however, a hell butterfly came with orders for all lieutenants to head to their assembly area to receive the latest report on the Ryoka invasion. Naruto and his dad had arrived at the meeting room first, with Haku, Fugaku, and Hiruzen arriving shortly afterwards. Minato managed to inform the three of Naruto's encounter with Ichigo and of the meeting they would hold before all of the other lieutenants, minus Yachiru Kusajishi of the 11th Division, arrived. As the lieutenants now waited for the report to arrive, Naruto was talking with Fell Renji as well as Rangaku Matsumoto, the lieutenant of the 10th Division. I guess I can't say I'm surprised. This Ichigo guy sounds way too much like myself and my predecessor Kaion, after all, Naruto said, making sure that he acted as though he had yet to meet Kurosaki. Renji had just told Naruto of the conversation he had with Rukia as he escorted her to the Senzaikyu. The part where Rukia reacted to the knowledge that Ichigo was still alive was the part that Naruto was responding to. That may be true, Naruto, but I doubt he has as much skill as either of you, Rangaku said. I wouldn't be too sure of that, Lieutenant Matsumoto, another voice said in response. The three lieutenants turned around and were surprised to see that it was Fugaku that had replied. These intruders were able to defeat Jidanbo, survived an encounter with Captain Ichimaru, and were able to breach the soul shield membrane. We have to assume that they're all very strong and very dangerous if they have already caused this much trouble, the former head of the Uchiha clan explained without revealing everything else that he now knew, surprising both Ranji and Matsumoto. Do you really think the Ryoka are that much a threat? Rangaku asked, to which Fugaku nodded. Of course, I'm sure that the officer from the 4th Division will now prove my point, Fugaku said, as if on cue. A man suddenly appeared at the door of the assembly room. 3rd seat of the 4th Division, Yasukaka Ayamura, reporting, the man said. Before he could say anything else, however, Naruto made his presence known to the 3rd seat in 2 sentences. You're late. You better have a good reason for that, or you can kiss your sorry ass goodbye. Naruto roared in a clearly irritated tone as Renji attempted to hold him back. The former shinobi already had too little time to waste on these reports, and this officer had made it even worse. Ayamura's face paled as he tried not to provoke the lieutenant, accidentally or otherwise, any further. The 3rd seat hadn't seen the Uzumaki lose his temper personally, but had heard enough of the stories to know that he didn't want to get on Naruto's bad side. Assuming he wasn't already there, that is. My apologies, Lieutenant Uzumaki. I was delayed due to some last-minute updates of great importance, Ayamura explained. Naruto, having calmed down thanks to Renji's intervention, raised an eyebrow upon hearing the last part of the 3rd-seated officer's explanation. What could be so damned important that could have forced us to wait 2 hours more than we were supposed to? Naruto thought to himself. He would get his answer soon enough, as Ayamura immediately began reading the report that was in his hands. 5 minutes later. The preliminary reports appear to suggest that the entire 11th Division, with the exceptions of Captain Kenpachi Zaraki, Lieutenant Yachiru Kusajishi, and the 4th-seated officer Zabuza Momochi, was completely wiped out, Ayamura said as he briefed the lieutenants on the part of the report regarding the events that had occurred today as of right now. The first few minutes of the report were little more than summary of what had happened to this morning, which, needless to say, annoyed several of the officers. The mood changed, however, when Ayamura briefed the lieutenants on the defeats of the 3rd-seated officer Akaku Madarame and the 5th-seated officer Yumachika Yasugawa, both of whom were from the 11th Division. The fact that 2 high-ranked officers were defeated by Ryoka was already a big shock. But an entire division being beaten. The reactions of some of the lieutenants to this bit news were not very surprising. That's impossible, Izuru Kira, the lieutenant of the 3rd Division, said. The 11th Division is gone? Renji asked in shock. The rage that he was suddenly feeling was understandable due to the fact that Ichigo was among the intruders and his close relations with his former division. How were these Ryoka able to do so much damage in just a few hours? Chojiro Sasaki, the 1st Division lieutenant, blurted out. The Shinobigami, while also feeling very bad for all the members 11th Division who were now casualties, thought of the defeat of the division in a more critical light compared to their fellow lieutenants, even if they didn't say those thoughts out loud. They charged headfirst into battle against an enemy without knowing who they were dealing with. What did they expect would happen? Fugaku asked rhetorically to himself. The 11th Division is even more poorly disciplined than I imagined. I guess this also proves that Naruto was right about Kurosaki, though, Minato thought to himself. Master Zabuza always said that the members of his division were all talk, minus Captain Zaraki. Haku thought as he shook his head. He remembered that Zabuza had told him of his rather poor opinion of his own division. Honestly, did they really want to start a war that badly? Was the thought on Hiruzen's mind at that moment. And people call me an idiot. I almost feel sorry for Zabuza since he has to deal with those dumbasses every day, Naruto thought as he sighed. After shaking off these thoughts, they then continued listening to the report. As Ayamura finished his report, the lieutenants went back to their respective barracks. Shinobigami meeting place, undisclosed location within the Seirei. Sometime in the evening. This secret chamber was a modest room by most standards. It was basically an semi-spherical interior with a 2-story high ceiling which was solid bedrock and a small stone urn in the center in which a fire been burning. Inside this room, Naruto and the other 8 former shinobi stood in a circle. They had already finished discussing what had happened between Naruto and the intruders earlier that day, as well as the plan of action they would now take. So that's the plan. Any questions? Naruto asked. As this meeting was his idea, he was basically the one would be in charge of what the Shinobigami planned to do now. When no one answered, Minato decided to ask his son an important question of his own to ending the meeting so that they could all prepare for what they planned. Naruto, were you able to retrieve it? Minato asked. It was a pain to go through with it, and I'm sure Rukia is going to kill me when she finds out, but that creep Mayuri was able to help me obtain it. I made sure that he wouldn't say anything about what happened until this is all over. I'll give it to old man Yama at that point, Naruto said, getting a nod from his father. I guess that's it, then, Minato said, ending the meeting. With that, everyone began to head towards the exit, except Naruto. Wait, Shisui-sensei, can I ask you something before you go? Naruto asked. Shisui stopped in his tracks as Naruto waited for everyone to leave before he finally asked his mentor if he could help him with his Bankai training. Shisui was caught by surprise at this sudden turnaround. Though Naruto had been more than capable of learning Bankai for quite some time, he had not even attempted it due to his father's request to wait, which Naruto had honored until that time. Are you sure want to do that, Naruto? I'm sure Minato is going to protest, Shisui said before Naruto interrupted him. Then I won't tell Dad that I'm trying to obtain my Bankai. You know that we're going to have use everything we have to stop that damned Aizen. You said that you discovered a secret training area near Sokyoku Hill, so we can use that place to train, Naruto said. Shisui sighed at this. The Uchiha guessed that, with Rukia now an unwilling pawn in Aizen's schemes, Naruto was now taking this matter very seriously and was not going to take no for an answer if he felt that this was something he had to do. I guess I can help you since it appears that you're not going to take no for an answer. Understand, however, that I'm only. You do remember what my explanation about how one obtains his or her Bankai, right? Shisui reminded him, to which Naruto nodded. Very well, then. I guess I'll help you out. We should wait until tomorrow, however, as you still have that lieutenant's meeting in the morning, Shisui pointed out. Naruto groaned at remembering that. Though his sensei was right in telling him to wait for that meeting, since there wouldn't be any more meetings, he was still getting tired of them. With all these useless meetings, I'm amazed that everyone else is surprised that Ichigo and his friends have evaded capture, Naruto thought to himself as he and his sensei left the meeting chamber for the night. Secret training area, Sokyoku Hill, the next day at noon. I can't believe a place this big has been hidden from everyone else right below the execution grounds. I wonder would go out of there, Naruto said, rather amazed at the size of the place. I sometimes wonder about the same thing, though I guess that's a moot point, Shisui said, getting a nod from his longtime student. In any case, we need to get started, since that snake Aizen is probably going to make his move at any moment, Naruto said. He, like the rest of the former shinobi, knew that they were running out of time to stop Aizen's plans. The night and morning after the meeting had brought even more chaos to the Seirei. There were many things that had happened in that time. Renji's defeat to Ichigo and the authorization for the use of one's Zanpakuto made the tension in the Seirei increase to unbearable levels. Then there was the Aizen's murder, which only made the anxiety in the air worse for every. While most of the other Shinigami were simply devastated by the loss of Aizen, especially the 5th Division 4th seated officer, Momo Hinamori, The former shinobi knew that this meant that Aizen had begun to make his move. Realizing that it wouldn't be long before they had to confront Aizen, his subordinates, Naruto immediately excused himself from the growing commotion at the scene of Aizen's murder, and went to find Shisui. After Naruto informed the Uchiha what had happened, they both headed to the secret training room, flash stepping as quickly as that they could make sure that no one was following them. Naruto shook off these thoughts before Shisui gave him one final warning. Before we begin, Naruto, I want that you understand this very well. Even though we still have 8 days until Rukia's execution, there's still a chance that Aizen might try to push up the date much sooner than that. So to be safe, I'm going to give you until this midnight to subjugate your Zanpakuto second longer. If you can't do it by that time, you'll just have to confront without a Bankai, Shisui said, making sure that his student understood what he said word for word. Naruto simply smirked in response to his sensei's warning. Then I'll just have to obtain my Bankai before then, Naruto replied confidently. Though he was rather surprised at how little time he would be given, Naruto knew that he was already pushing his and Rukia's luck enough as it is by taking this time to train, so he would just have to work with what time he had. Very well, then. Start by activating your Shikai, Shisui said as he set a timer for midnight. Naruto nodded before he unsheathed his blade. Open the floodgates, Kamikaze, Naruto said as he threw his Zanpakuto into the air, the tip of the pointed towards the ceiling. The blade then stopped midair as a small cloud suddenly formed above it. The cloud began growing in size and darkness until, after a few seconds, the cloud turned into a small thunderstorm a couple 100 yards wide. The moment the cloud reached this size, a very powerful lightning bolt struck Naruto's blade, which was still hovering in the air. After the flash of light dissipated, the blade fell into Naruto's grasp, revealing Kamikaze's Shikai form. The blade was now a lightning bolt that had been compressed into the shape of a Chikuto sword, the type of sword that Sasuke wields in Naruto Shippuden, which was releasing small gusts of wind as Naruto held the blade. A small yellow tag was now attached to the base of the hilt with the kanjis for lightning, water, and wind written on it. Now what, Shisui-sensei? Naruto asked as he attempted to contain the sporadic release of wind from his blade. Have the spirit of Kamikaze materialize. I'll use my Ryotsu to help maintain it long enough for you to try to subjugate him, Shisui explained. Since Naruto could only keep the spirit of Kamikaze materialized for a few hours without aid, due to the fact that he had only learned to do so very recently, Shisui would keep the Zanpakuto spirit materialized until his student achieved Bankai. Or until midnight arrived, whichever one came first. Naruto, without saying another word, focused his Ryotsu into his blade, which in turn generated more light until an explosion of lighting radiated across the training grounds. Had anyone been standing on the hill above the secret room, they would have felt a slight tremor caused by the powerful shockwave generated by the explosion. Thankfully for both Shinobigami, no one was close enough to Sokyoku Hill notice anything out of the ordinary. As the light generated by the blast dissipated along the temporary loss of hearing caused by the subsequent thunderclap, both Naruto and Shisui could hear another person, presumably a male from the sound of his voice, called out to them. Took you long enough to finally do that, don't you think? Lil, Naruto? The voice said in a clearly mocking tone. Chapter 4 Preparations complete. The Shinobigami move out. Current time. A giant vein popped out of Naruto's forehead when he heard his Zanpakuto's nickname for him. For once in your miserable life, Kamikaze, would you stop calling me that stupid nickname? Naruto said with great irritation as the spirit of Kamikaze became visible through the dissipating cloud of dust. It was a man who appeared to be in his late teens, who was around 6 feet tall with a lean build. He had spiky black hair that went well below his waist and was tied into a ponytail, as well as blood-red eyes with black slits due to the partial influence of Kurama's power. Kamikaze wore what could only be described as a coat of lighting shaped into the form of the samurai-like armor that was once used by many shinobi before the founding of the shinobi villages. Along with this armor, the Zanpakuto wore a black undershirt with sleeves that reached below his elbows, black pants that went to the middle of his shins, black shinobi sandals, a blood-red shinobi headband that had metal plate with the stylized leaf symbol of Konoha emblazoned on the metal, and a red sash tied around his waist. He held a blade in his right hand that was basically the pure lighting Chikuto that Naruto would wield when using his Shikai, except this one was a few inches shorter than that version, and instead of a tag attached to the bottom of the hilt, a thin rope made out of pure lighting was attached. The rope connected the sword to Kamikaze's sash, and, with the rope being made of lightning, it could expand to whatever length the Zanpakuto spirit desired. As Naruto fumed at Kamikaze's insult, the Zanpakuto simply flashed a smile at his partner's irritation. "But I like calling you that. It lets me push your buttons all the more easily, Lil Naruto," Kamikaze said in response to the lieutenant's annoyance. Naruto, not surprisingly, got even more steamed at his Zanpakuto's mannerisms. Unlike the Zanpakuto spirits of some of Shinigami, the other Kamikaze didn't have any issues with Naruto, or even Kurama for that matter, but the Zanpakuto did enjoy annoying the hell out of both the Biju and his Jinchuriki just to get an amusing reaction from the two. Shisui decided to refocus Naruto's attention on the task at hand before the Uzumaki tried to kill his own Zanpakuto and end his life as a Shinigami in the process. "Enough of this nonsense, the both of you," Shisui demanded, getting the attention of both Naruto and Kamikaze before turning his attention to the Zanpakuto. "Now then, Kamikaze, based on your little conversation with Naruto, it's obvious that you already know why you're here and that you've overheard what has been said, so I won't ask. Once I stabilize your materialization, I assume that you can begin right away." Shisui asked the manifested Zanpakuto.
"Yep," was the only reply Kamikaze gave. As soon as the Zanpakuto said that, Shisui shunpoed in front of the Zanpakuto and placed his hand on the manifested spirit's chest and began to channel some of his Reiatsu into him until, after a minute or two, the Uchiha managed to completely stabilize the manifestation of the Zanpakuto.
Once Shisui finished, the manifested Kamikaze placed his left palm into the ground, which apparently caused hundreds of blades, in the form of the spirit's Shikai, to emerge. All of these blades were stuck in the ground in a vertical position as Kamikaze picked one of them up, as the blade and the rope it was attached to had suddenly vanished. "Now then, Naruto, your challenge is very simple. One of these blades is the true me and is the only one that can defeat me. You have to find it before I can kill you, since I'll attacking you the whole time entire, or before your time runs out, and defeat me with it. Oh, and every time you pick up the wrong blade there's a nasty surprise that'll await you," Kamikaze explained.
The last part of the Zanpakuto's explanation made Naruto shudder, as his Zanpakuto had a slightly dark sense of humor and he wasn't very shy about it. Naruto reached for the closest blade to him with a great deal of anxiety, and for good reason, because the moment he made contact with the blade's hilt he was zapped but good by said blade before it disappeared.
After a couple of seconds, Naruto regained feeling in his right hand, at which point he turned to glare at the smiling Kamikaze. "You are a cruel man, you know that?" Naruto asked rhetorically. Now, Lil Naruto, being a critic isn't going to help you get Bankai any sooner," Kamikaze said, which provoked his wielder even further. After Naruto attempted to grab another blade, and getting zapped as a result, he turned to face his Zanpakuto just as he dodged his Zanpakuto's first attack. "When I get my hands on the true you, you're so dead, Kamikaze," Naruto declared as he continued his efforts to find the true Kamikaze. I'm going to skip this fight since it would take too long for me to write, especially due to the nature of this chapter. Almost 6 hours later, which he managed to do, over 4 hours after the training had begun. It had not been an easy task, of course, and the fact that he had to find the correct blade while the manifested Kamikaze was continuously attacking him made the task more daunting. Eventually, however, Naruto found the blade that was the true form of Kamikaze and, after fighting the manifested Zanpakuto spirit for another grueling hour, the Uzumaki managed to defeat Kamikaze using a combination of swordsmanship, a combination various Kido spells, and the nine-tailed chakra mode to finally subjugate Kamikaze and obtain his Bankai. After Kamikaze took half an hour to explain the nature of his Bankai to Naruto, the Shinobigami finally undid his Zanpakuto's manifestation. With another 2 hours before the next scheduled lieutenant's meeting, he used the special hot spring located within the training area to heal himself, since the training he'd just undergone left him too seriously injured for even Kurama to heal his wounds quickly without any aid. As Naruto quickly got himself dressed in another shiakusho, he turned to Shisui, who had just woken up from a short nap he had taken while waiting for his student. "Did you sense those approaching Reiatsus, sensei?" Naruto asked, to which the Uchiha nodded. "Yeah, and they're clearly not members of the Gote 13 whom I'm aware of. Based on the huge amounts of Reiatsu, these two must be with the intruders," Shisui reasoned. Naruto smirked at this. "Oh, they definitely are, Shisui-sensei. After all, I fought one of those two intruders earlier," Naruto said just as the sources of the Reiatsu appeared. One of them was a dark-skinned woman who was a little over 5 feet tall with a slender figure, golden-colored eyes that were cat-like in appearance, and long purple hair that she kept in a ponytail. She wore an orange shirt, under which she wore what appeared to be a black undershirt, black stretch pants, light brown shoes and a pale brown sash that she wore around her waist. The woman was not the one who had Naruto's attention, however. It was the other person who the woman was carrying on her shoulder, an unconscious and badly injured Ichigo. While Naruto stood there, looking at Ichigo's condition in shock, Shisui focused his attention on the woman. "You must be one of the intruders, correct?" the Uchiha asked, to which the woman nodded in reply. Shisui raised an eyebrow at this. "Why did you come to this place if there are two potential enemies already here? With your level of power, I'm sure you would have detected us," he asked with curiosity. Even though Shisui could tell that this woman was easily at the level of a captain based on her Reiatsu, despite her efforts to hide it, the Uchiha thought that this woman would not come here when there were two potential threats in the area. While Shisui, Naruto, and the other Shinobigami intended to help with Rukia's rescue, there was no way she could have known about that. Or so Shisui thought. The woman simply smirked. "Considering the fact that you two haven't attacked me yet, I'm pretty sure that's not the case, especially since you Shinobigami plan to rescue Rukia as well." Naruto Uzumaki and Shisui Uchiha, the women rhetorically asked in a teasing tone. Both Shisui and Naruto couldn't believe what this woman just said. She not only knew their names, she also knew about their group's plan. Naruto did what most Shinigami would have probably expected the Uzumaki to do in that situation. He unleashed a massive barrage of questions upon the mysterious woman. "How did you know who we are and what we're planning? Who the hell are you? Why are you here? What are doing carrying Ichigo on your shoulder? And why does he look like he got into a fight with the eye-patch psycho?" Naruto asked. If you can't figure it out, that's the nickname Naruto uses to refer to Kenpachi Zaraki, unaware of just how on the mark he actually was. Shisui's eyes widened upon hearing his student's last question, but for a very different reason than one might expect. So that boy she's carrying on her shoulder is Ichigo Kurosaki. No wonder Naruto took an interest in him. With all that Reiatsu that he has, it's amazing that he's just a human, the Uchiha thought to himself as the women simply smirked at Naruto's questioning. "Well, it'll take a while to explain it all to you, so I'll start off with an introduction. My name is Yoruichi Shihoin," the now named Yoruichi said. Shinobigami meeting place, the following night. Naruto was in the hideout with the rest of the former shinobi discussing the furthering of their plans to save Rukia recent and to stop Aizen, as well as the recent turn of events. Needless to say, it was a very long turn. The first, and the most important, was Naruto and Shisui's talk with the intruder named Yoruichi, who explained the situation regarding Ichigo and 13 the other intruders. Ichigo had tried to break Rukia out of the Senzaikyu, but Yoruichi was forced to render him unconscious and bring him to the secret training ground after Byakuya and Yukataki arrived at the holding cell. Yoruichi then told the two former shinobi that she intended to train Ichigo in order to have him obtain his own Bankai in order to save Rukia. Neither shinobi really questioned the possibility, since the orange-haired Shinigami had the necessary Reiatsu to achieve that level. Though she left a few of Naruto's questions unanswered, they really didn't have that time to receive the answers for them due to the lieutenant's meeting due to begin an hour from then. The three Shinigami decided to simply focus on their individual rescue efforts for the time being. After exiting the training area, Naruto made a beeline to the lieutenant's meeting, which he got to with 10 minutes to spare. After the meeting, which was late at night, Naruto and the other Shinobigami headed to their secret meeting place. "Does everyone know what to do?" Naruto asked, referring to the various jobs that he and the other former shinobi were going to do as part of their plans to save Rukia. The others nodded in response. Despite having to adjust their plans to the situation, the changes weren't very drastic, so they were implemented very quickly. Naruto sighed in relief at this, since he really didn't have time for setbacks. The fact that Rukia's execution had been moved to the following, and the fact that the young lieutenant had to juggle around with 3 different rescue attempts, the Shinobigami, the intruders, and both captains Yukataki and Kyoraku were all trying to save Rukia's life, meant that he had little time for setbacks. Alright, then. Let's get some rest. The fight begins tomorrow, Naruto declared. As the former shinobi dispersed, he realized that tomorrow was going to be a very long day. Chapter 5. The Forestalled Ambition, Current Time. Yamamoto Genryusai stared at Rukia as she stood on top of the platform, all tied up for her execution. Release the Sokyoku, he ordered. Yes, sir. The Kido Corps surrounded the Sokyoku and clasped their hands together in a form of a hand seal. The ropes that were attached to the poles on the ground slowly began to come apart, eventually snapping. They began to circle the Sokyoku lazily, growing faster with each passing second until the ropes bounding the halberd unwound and sped towards the ground, stabbing into it. Rukia stared up at the Sokyoku as she thought back to when she and Jin had their little exchange at the bridge. Even though Ichimaru troubled my heart at that moment, little by little, my peace is returning. But is this because of the Captain Commander's promise, or perhaps it's because when Ni-sama saw me disturbed, clinging shamefully to life, he shut me out without even a hint of doubt? Thank you so much, Ni-sama, said Rukia quietly as 3 cubes surfaced from the platform. The rope bounding Rukia's hands together suddenly faded away, and the 3 cubes placed themselves in front of Rukia's hands and feet. Rukia started to float up to the scaffold, and the halberd suddenly erupted into flames, a pillar of fire surrounding it and dissipating to reveal a gigantic phoenix at least 2 to 3 times the size of the colossal scaffold. Kakao, said the Captain Commander as he stared up at the majestic phoenix. The true form of the Sokyoku blade, and the final enforcer of the death penalty. Once he pierces the criminal, the death penalty will be over. As the captains and the other bystanders stood in awe of Kakao, Rukia's eyes grew wide as she saw the phoenix. The majestic Sokyoku reared its neck and screeched, spreading out its wings as it prepared to charge. Rukia bowed her head as it sped at her, finally at peace. Meanwhile, Captain, aren't you finished yet? Naruto pranced around. He said this, getting more and more impatient by the minute. Yukataki frowned at this. Patience, Naruto. These kinds of things take time. He suddenly clapped his hands together a few seconds later as a cloud of smoke seeped out behind the closed doors. It's finally finished. Naruto clenched his hands into a tight fist and rushed out the door. I'm going on ahead, he yelled as he sped towards Sokyoku Hill. I'll save Rukia, so get over to Sokyoku Hill with the shield as soon as possible. And Naruto. Yukataki called out as he rushed to open the sealed artifact. Wait for me. Sokyoku Hill, Seirei, Soul Society, meanwhile. Rukia opened her eyes, confused by the fact that she hadn't been pierced by the Sokyoku yet. What's going on here? Are you alright, Rukia? Her eyes widened as she recognized the voice. She slowly lifted her head to see an orange-haired figure standing in front of her, amazingly blocking the gigantic phoenix with his Zanpakuto using just one hand. Ichigo, is that you, Ichigo? Ichigo looked back and grinned at Rukia. Yay, it's me. I've come to save you, Rukia, he said coolly. Rukia's lips started to tremble, and she bowed her head, tears welling up in her eyes. Why, you idiot, I told you not to rescue me. Ichigo looked confused. Huh? Rukia's head shot up, and Ichigo raised an eyebrow as she scowled at him comically. You idiot. I told you not to come and rescue me. Why did you come to rescue me? Oi oi oi. Raged Ichigo. What do you mean? Why did you come to rescue me? You're supposed to thank me, you idiot. Rukia stuck out her bottom lip as she turned her head away. HMPH, I never asked you to. Ichigo scowled at her. Why, you little. Ichigo, Rukia. Ichigo and Rukia looked down to see Naruto speeding towards them as he waved at them. Oi, Naruto, yelled Ichigo as he waved back at him using his free hand. It's about time you came. Naruto activated Kurama's shroud and used his chakra arms to hoist himself up on the scaffold, releasing the mode right after. What took you so long? asked Ichigo. I was with old man Yukataki, Naruto responded. He looked around the area, a frustrated look on his face. Just where is he? Whoa. Naruto's head snapped around as he was Ichigo stumble, the Sokyoku withdrawing for a second strike. Watch out, Ichigo, warned Naruto. That thing has been said to power of 1,000,000 Zanpakutos. You won't survive the next attack. Ichigo grimaced as he glared at the phoenix, a determined look on his face. Che. This is nothing. I got this, Naruto. Sui Feng narrowed her eyes as she stared at Ichigo. Who is that guy? The Sokyoku is said to contain the offensive and defensive abilities of 1,000,000 Zanpakutos, and yet this kid was able to hold it back, with just one hand. What kind of power is this? Her eyes suddenly widened in shock as a velvet-colored rope wrapped itself around the charging phoenix's neck, halting its attack. The golden pole attached to the end of the rope slammed into the ground, holding the phoenix in place. Yukataki Jashiro, said Sui Feng to herself. Shunsui suddenly appeared in front of the pole, placing his hand on it to stabilize it. Yo, Yukataki. You sure like to make people wait, don't ya? I'm sorry, replied Yukataki as he glanced over at Shunsui. The release took me a while, but now we're good to go. Sui Feng clenched her teeth in frustration as she recognized the crest on the shield. That's the Shihoin clan seal. Shunsui and Yukataki both drew their Zanpakutos and slammed the blade into the shield, activating it. The velvet-colored rope that was binding the Sokyoku began to glow, and the flame quickly traveled up the rope towards the trapped phoenix. Boom. The Sokyoku exploded as the Shihoin shield activated, and large chunks of fire rained down on the people below. Impossible, thought Sui Feng to herself as she shielded her face with her arms. Ichigo performed a backflip and landed on the scaffold. Rukia looked up at him. Wait, Ichigo. What are you doing? Just shut up and watch, said Ichigo as he grabbed the piece of cloth that was attached to Zangetsu. He threw his Zanpakuto up into the air and started to twirl it in the air. He suddenly yanked at the cloth and grabbed the hilt of the oversized katana, holding it blade down. His eyes flared as it turned clear blue, and a massive burst of Ryotsu enveloped Ichigo, powering him up. He slammed the point of Zangetsu into the scaffold, and it began to glow blue. Thud. A giant of dust enveloped the whole entire area as the scaffold exploded. It slowly dissipated to reveal the main part of the scaffold completely destroyed. You never shut up about how I shouldn't rescue you and how I should just go home. I told you, didn't I? Your opinions are just gonna keep getting ignored, said Ichigo as he held Rukia. Rukia gave Ichigo a sad smile. Yeah. Aizen looked up at the scaffold, a look of disbelief on her face. I am possible, the Sokyoku stand is. Oi, Ichigo. Ichigo looked ahead to see Renji drop the unconscious body of a Kido Corps member on the ground, his Zanpakuto in his hand. What? Rukia stared at him, her eyes wide. A huge smile slowly spread across her face. Renji. Thank goodness you're alive, Renji. Alright, said Ichigo lazily. He slowly lifted Rukia into the air and glanced over at Renji. Get ready, Renji. Huh? Rukia looked up Ichigo. Wait, Ichigo. What are you going to do? Renji's face turned blue as he realized what Ichigo was going to do. Wait, hey. You aren't planning to. Take her, yelled Ichigo as he threw Rukia at Renji like a football. Ah! Screamed Rukia as she flew towards Renji. Why you baka? Screamed Renji as she crashed into him. Oi, you dumbass! Scolded Naruto as he smacked Ichigo across the head. What the hell was that for? Ichigo rubbed the back of his head as he pouted. Well, I just thought that it was a cool thing to do at the moment. You idiot. Naruto repeated. You're just lucky she wasn't hurt, or I'd beat the crap out of you. He shook his head and pulled a paper bomb out of his uniform. Get ready, he said, throwing the paper bomb on the broken scaffold. In various locations throughout Seireiti, Kushina, Mikoto, and Fugaku all looked up at Sokyoku Hill as they saw a mini-explosion. Upon seeing the signal, they of them all simultaneously grabbed a smoke bomb from underneath their uniforms and threw them on the ground, after which they flash-stepped towards the hill where Naruto was at. The Shinigami that were spread throughout Seireiti looked at the 4 giant pillars of smoke that rose up from 4 various locations, all of them confused as to what they were. "Let's go and check it out," said a random Shinigami, calling out to his comrades as he rushed towards a random pillar of smoke. "With Naruto and Ichigo. They're gone," Ichigo stated as he watched Renji run through the area with Rukia in his arms. "Yay." Naruto looked down and saw Hiruzen and Haku amidst the crowd of witnesses that were gathered on the hill. Naruto suddenly seemed to disappear as he flash-stepped to their side. "Hey, Gigi, Haku." "Naruto-san," exclaimed Haku. There's no time," said Naruto, shaking his head. "I need you and Gigi to go after Renji and Rukia and make sure that they're okay." Hiruzen nodded. "Got it," he replied before he flash-stepped away with Haku followed him closely behind. Sui Feng narrowed her eyes as she glared at her vice-captain flash-stepping away. "Haku, you traitor. I'll make sure to destroy you with my own too." Thud. "What?" exclaimed Sui Feng as she went speeding past the other Shinigamis and off the cliff. Who are you, you?" The unknown figure remained silent as she continued to hold tight onto her. Sui Feng narrowed her eyes as she grabbed the assailant's arm. "I asked you who you were," she roared as she threw her over her shoulders. The figure suddenly disappeared and reappeared behind a surprised Sui Feng, kicking her in the back and sending her flying into a tree. Sui Feng balanced herself in midair and grabbed a branch of the tree, flipping over and landing on the branch safely. She narrowed her eyes as she stared at the figure. There's only one person in all of Soul Society that could move that fast. "Shihoin, Yoruichi," spat Sui Feng as she glared at the figure. "Hey, it looks like you recognized me, Sui Feng." "I see," said Sui Feng as she gave Yoruichi. "Just because you've been gone a long time doesn't necessarily mean that you've raised your skills." Yoruichi removed her mask and smiled at her. "It looks like your skills have dulled quite a bit, on the other hand." "Don't be so full of yourself," said Sui Feng, a tone of danger in her voice. "When will you stop thinking that you're so better than us? Both the secret mobile core and the correction core are under my control now." Yoruichi's eyes grew wide as Sui Feng drew her Zanpakuto. "Your days are numbered," stated Sui Feng as she slammed the point of her katana into the tree. "Shihoin Yoruichi." Yoruichi blinked as 20 members of the secret mobile core suddenly surrounded her. "Now, let's see." Back in Sokyoku Hill, Shunsui tipped his hat as he grinned. "Well," he said as he grabbed Yukataki by the hem of his captain's uniform. "I guess that it's time to disappear, huh?" Yukataki's eyes grew wide. Wait. What?" "Let's go," exclaimed Shunsui as he sped towards the edge of the cliff, dragging his fellow captain along with him. Yamamoto Genryusai watched as they jumped off of the cliff, his face unreadable. "Lieutenant Abarai, please stop," called out Aizen as she and Sasaki Chojiro ran after him. Renji, however, ignored her and kept on moving forward. "Whoa." Aizen and Chojiro stopped as they felt something in front of them, and Renji looked back and grinned. Ichigo suddenly appeared in front of them, his cloak flapping behind him. Naruto appeared by his side, his Zanpakuto in his hand. "I'm afraid that I can't let you two pass," stated Ichigo as he stared hard at them. "Run, Itagumo, frozen cloud." Aizen cried out as she unsheathed her Zanpakuto. Her katana began to glow, and the blade slowly turned much more thin as 2 smaller and thinner blades protruded from either side of the hilt at a 45-degree angle. "Pierce, Ganryomaru, stern speared," said Chojiro as he raised his Zanpakuto up to his face. The blade began to glow, and it slowly thinned out into a rapier-like sword. "What?" Aizen watched as Ichigo slammed the point of his Zanpakuto into the ground and quickly dispatched Chojiro with a simple uppercut to the jaw. Impossible. He managed to defeat Lieutenant Sasaki without even using his Zanpakuto? Ichigo turned to Aizen and flickered to her side, kneeing her in the stomach before she could even react. Aizen fell on the ground, and she stared up at Ichigo before she blacked out. "He's way too strong for us, just who is he?" Ichigo felt something speeding towards him and grabbed his Zanpakuto, swiftly turning around to meet Kuchiki Byakuya's charge head-on, their Zanpakutos clashing together as Ichigo glared at him, his eyes narrowed. "I can see you, Kuchiki Byakuya, said Ichigo calmly. Byakuya simply blinked, his face immobile. Kurosaki Ichigo, do not be so arrogant. Just because you were barely able to match my speed does not mean that you are a match for me. Naruto glanced at the two unconscious vice captains and nodded. Well, I'm off then, Ichigo. Ichigo looked surprised. What? You're going, Naruto? Naruto grinned at him. I trust you, Ichigo. You can defeat Byakuya. Ichigo's eyes widened in shock as Naruto said this. I'm going to stop this madness once and for all, said Naruto as he turned around to leave. You take care of things here, Ichigo. Ichigo smiled as he bent his head. You got it. He lifted his head to lock eyes with the captain of the 6th Division. I'll definitely beat him. Naruto stayed still for a brief second before sighing. Let's finish this, he said, and with that, he disappeared. Naruto flew past a column of buildings, quickly spinning around on his feet and flash-stepping past a giant wall and speeding towards the Central 46 compound as fast as he could. I'm sure that you were right about me having the fastest flash step in all of Soul Society, Dad. If what I'm worried about is right, I'm gonna need it. Meanwhile, let's move. Zabuza, Yachiru, Chad, Ishida, Orihime, and Ganju ran past a group of Shinigamis as Zabuza and Yachiru led the group to Sokyoku Hill. Wait, stop, ordered Zabuza as he skidded to a halt. What is it, Zabuza-san? Asked Orihime. Zabuza looked down at the ground. I want you guys to stay here. He glanced back at the tiny pink-haired vice captain who was staring up at him. Yachiru Fukutaichu, please stay here with the others. I'll go up to Sokyoku Hill myself and get rid of any threats myself. Yachiru gave the 4th seat a huge smile. Sure thing, Momo-chan. Orihime and the others snickered at this. Momo-chan, snickered Ishida. He quickly fell silent and straightened up as Zabuza glared at him. Just kidding, Zabuza-san. Zabuza sighed at this before turning to Yachiru. I'm off. Orihime and the others excluding Yachiru of course eyes widened in surprise as Zabuza suddenly disappeared using flash step. So fast, stuttered Orihime. Central 46 compound, Seireiti, Soul Society, meanwhile. Minato and Shisui flash stepped to the front of the Central 46 compound, looking around to see if there was anyone around. Well, the outside's empty, observed Shisui. He turned around to look at Minato. What now, Minato-san? There's not time to waste, said Minato as he ran towards the door. I have a bad feeling about something. Catch up when you can. And with that, he disappeared. A few minutes later, Hinamori threw herself into her captain's arms, tears leaking out of her eyes as she looked up at him. Captain Aizen. Her lips started to tremble as she looked down, and she started to sob, unable to help herself. Aizen gave Hinamori a genuine smile as she sobbed into his arms. There, Hinamori. Everything will be fine. See Captain Aizen, sobbed Hinamori. I'm so glad that why you're okay. Busy crying. She didn't notice her captain pull his Zanpakuto out of its sheath. Farewell, Hinamori, whispered Aizen, his blade speeding towards Hinamori's heart. What? Aizen's eyes grew wide as Minato suddenly appeared in front of him, blocking his sword with his own. Minato, said Aizen, his usual fake smile on his face. What are you doing here? I could ask you the same thing, Aizen, Minato responded, his eyes narrowed. You tried to kill your 4th seat? I was trying to save her from the agony of having to live without me, stated Aizen, spreading his arms out wide. It's my way of helping her out. What else would you have me do, Minato? Wait, said Hinamori as she stared up at Aizen, her eyes wide. What's going on here, Captain Aizen? Nothing, Hinamori. Minato looked down at her and gave her a gently look. It's nothing that you need to worry about just yet. Hinamori looked at him. Lieutenant N. Namikaze? Sleep, whispered Minato, tapping Hinamori's head gently with his fingers. Her eyes started to droop, and she fell down into a kneeling position, her eyes fluttering close. Aizen. Very impressive, Minato, said Aizen, even without an incantation. Minato gently placed the unconscious Hinamori on the floor and looked up at Aizen. Minato. Minato and Aizen looked around to see Shisui, Hitsugaya Toshiro, and his vice-captain Matsumoto Rangaku crashing through the door. Hitsugaya Taiko, exclaimed Minato. Lieutenant Namikaze. Hitsugaya looked at Aizen, and then at the sleeping Hinamori on the floor. Momo, just what the hell's going on here? Do not worry, Captain Hitsugaya. I just put her to sleep for a while, explained Minato as he kept his eyes on Aizen. I just caught Aizen trying to stab her in the heart, and I was barely able to stop him.
Aizen, Hitsugaya glared at him, his eyes turning icy blue. I'll kill you for tea.
No, Captain Hitsugaya, said Minato, holding his arm out in front of the captain of the 10th Division. Please take Hinamori and get out of here. Like hell we will. Hitsugaya glared at Minato. I don't exactly know what's going on here, but... Please. Hitsugaya's eyes grew wide for a brief second before softening. Captain, let's leave this to them, said Rangaku softly, putting her hand on his shoulders. We should get Hinamori out of here. Hitsugaya closed his eyes. Lieutenant Namikaze, I'm counting on you. Minato nodded. Understood. Now please, leave this to me and Shisui. His eyes suddenly grew hard as he looked down at the floor. We'll take of Aizen once and for all. Hitsugaya nodded and scooped Hinamori into his arms, Flash stepping away with Rangaku. As soon as they disappeared, Minato and Shisui turned to face Aizen. Why are you willing to confront your own captain so easily, Minato? Don't you feel any regret or guilt for what you're about to do? Minato stared at his captain, his gaze unwavering. I've never trusted you. Even when I first met you, I knew that there was something off about you. I also knew that you were aware of my suspicions about you this whole time, so don't try and play any games with me. I was always ready to fight you if the time ever came. I had always hoped that I was wrong, but it seems that my suspicions were correct. Aizen smiled at this. I see, we will defeat you, Aizen Sosuke, said Minato, a determined look on his face. He turned to Shisui and nodded, and Shisui slowly drew his Zanpakuto from its sheath. You got that right, said Shisui. Minato and Shisui both pointed their Zanpakutos at Aizen, calling out their respective Shikai commands.